Exposed. The sinister secrets of my haunted cardiac ICU, 7 unexplained cases that terrified me. Emma had never been more terrified in her life. Each night at the cardiac ICU felt like stepping into a scene from a horror film. Fluorescent lights flickered, casting a ghastly glow across murmuring patients. The machines beeped rhythmically, but beneath that melody, whispers curled like smoke, promising dread. The one in white, they'd mutter, eyes wide with fear. Emma put her heart into saving others. Yet this night, her own heart raced from the weight of unseen horrors. She worked night shifts alone, the quiet punctuated by sharp beeps and the rustle of sheets. Yet, there was something more, something lurking just beyond her vision. Shadows danced in empty corners, fingers of darkness caressing the edges of her awareness. She brushed it off as exhaustion, but it crept under her skin like a chill. Then came Mr. Harris, gripping her hand with skeletal strength, his breath ragged. "Yes, here, Emma," he whispered, "the doctor. He comes in white." Emma swallowed hard, her pulse drumming in her ears. With each word, his eyes became mirrors of terror. "What doctor?" she dared to ask, dread pooling in her stomach. But the lights flickered, and time warped around her as screams echoed in her mind. A hush settled over the ward, the usual distant sounds of the hospital fading to an ominous silence. Before she could catch her breath, she felt it, an icy draft, an ominous shiver climbing her spine. She had to find out if she wasn't alone in this horror. As her research unraveled the experiences of previous patients, she found tangled connections, similar tales of shadows in sterile white coats, stalking the ICU like a predator. It wasn't exhaustion. It was a pattern, unexplained events chillingly familiar among those who had come to this place seeking help. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that is happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. Emma felt her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against the encroaching darkness. Another patient's family had come looking for help, but their little girl, Sophie, had been turned away repeatedly. Sophie, with big scared eyes like a boy Emma once learned about in Class 1, lost to the shadows. A dark pit yawned in the recesses of her mind. As she prepared to protect Sophie, the lights above buzzed, flickering out one by one, dimming the hope as the whispers crescendoed. Shadows churned like smoke, closing in on her. She felt it, icy fingers clawing at her, dragging threads of despair. Time fragmented, her breath caught in her throat as the atmosphere thickened with an insatiable dread. Would she uncover the truth before darkness swallowed her whole? Or would Sophie become another whispered name lost to the walls of this haunted ICU? A ghostly figure lurked beyond the light, beckoning to the lost souls. It was time to confront the chilling secrets, but what awaited her was a more complex terror than she ever imagined. A truth she wasn't sure she could survive. The air in the ICU felt thick, suffocating. Emma's mind raced, and her heart pounded in her chest like a war drum. She could barely hear the moans and murmurs of the patients over the tempest of fear swirling in her head. The whispers were louder now, almost echoing off the cold, sterile walls. The one in white, the phrase looped in her mind, the specter of dread looming larger with each passing second. She turned her focus back to Sophie. The girl was only 6, lying eerily still in her bed. A ghostly pallor washed over her face. Emma's resolve solidified. She couldn't let shadows win, not while a child was in her care. Adrenaline surged through her veins as she stepped closer. Just then, the overhead lights flickered violently one last time, plunging the room into semi-darkness. Emma's heart seized. The emergency lights bathed the ward in a harsh, sickly glow, throwing long shadows that twisted into grotesque forms along the walls. She moved to Sophia's bedside, her hands trembling as she took the girl's small, fragile hand in hers. She whispered reassurances that felt hollow. A sudden chill swept through the room, colder than the lies that haunted her mind. Emma could have sworn she heard the faintest whisper, brushing against her ear like a breath. "Leave now," it hissed. She recoiled, her pulse racing faster than ever. The normal rhythm of the machines faded, replaced with a heavy silence that felt almost alive. Emma looked around the room, expecting to find a fellow nurse or a doctor. Yet the ICU was empty, save for her and the trembling child. She fought the urge to flee. The children's ward was only a few doors down, but something rooted her to the spot. A duty, promise. "Please, just a little longer," she encouraged Sophie. But the girl's eyelids fluttered, caught in a battle between sleep and some unseen force. "I don't want to be here, Emma," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. The child's small frame shook, and in that moment, Emma's resolve began to waver. Suddenly, a noise broke the stillness sharp, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. Emma spun around, eyes locked on the darkened hallway outside the room. There was movement, something shifting in the shadows. A white figure glided past the dim light, disappearing into the depths of the corridor as quickly as it appeared. Panic surged, clawing at her throat. "Mr. Harris," she called out, hoping for a response, any response to tether her rationality. But nothing came, just the suffocating silence mixed with a muffled, delirious giggle that echoed through the hall. "Leave this place," the voice again, this time clearer, laced with malice. Emma felt icy fingers trail down her back. She turned back to Sophie, whose gaze was frozen on the doorway, eyes wide with terror. "He's coming," the girl whimpered, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Emma's mind raced. She had to choose. Stay and protect Sophie or unravel the dark force lurking in the ICU. What if by remaining, she only drew its attention? "Maybe this isn't the place for you," she whispered, remembering a tale of courage she had once told her niece. Just as fear settled in her chest, she made her decision. Emma reached for the call button, but before she could press it, a shadow loomed larger in the doorway, a figure draped in white, its presence both familiar and terror-inducing. "Emma," it intoned, sending chill rippling through her body. "I've come for what's mine." As the figure stepped into the light, Emma's breath caught, and her world tilted. She was not alone, and whatever awaited her was darker than she ever imagined. The figure moved with an unnatural grace, standing just beyond the threshold. Emma's heart beat like a trapped bird in her chest. She was frozen, caught in the gaze of those eyes, dark, hollow, like the abyss itself. "Leave her alone," Emma shouted, forcing her voice to cut through the oppressive air. But it came out weaker than she intended. The figure only smiled, a sickening curl of its lips that didn't reach its eyes. "She's mine now," it crooned, the words slithering through the air like smoke. The room trembled, coldness wrapping around Emma's limbs, numbing her resolve. "No," Sophie whispered, trembling as she clutched the blanket tighter. "Please, Emma, don't let it take me." Panic clawed at Emma's throat. She couldn't let this thing take Sophie. Fear transformed into determination. She couldn't let fear win. Summoning every ounce of courage, she stepped forward, shaking off the icy grip of dread. "Enough!" she screamed, her voice more solid now against the haunting laughter that rose around them. "You don't have any power here." The figure wavered, as if Emma's words struck it. The shadows in the room shifted, swirling and snapping like angry fingers. Emma could feel the weight of her resolve pushing back against the overwhelming darkness. But it was a brief respite. Then Sophie gasped. "Look behind you." Emma turned just as a burst of cold air whipped through the room, making her shiver to the bone. When she spun back, the figure loomed closer, its face shifting and melting like candle wax, revealing flashes of past patience, their eyes pleading and lost. "Turn away, Emma. Get me out." Sophie's voice cracked in terror, breaking through the haze. Driven by instinct, Emma grabbed Sophia's hand firmly, pulling the girl up, ready to flee. But as they moved towards the door, the heavy atmosphere turned into suffocating chains, wrapping around them like a vice. Emma felt the pressure, wrapping tighter as the figure's laughter echoed in her ears, sinister and mocking. Your escape is futile, taunted. She belongs with us now. Her heart thumped loud enough to drown out the laughter. She could barely breathe, could barely think, the panic rising to a suffocating crescendo. But inside that chaos, clarity flickered. No, you can't have her, Emma shouted again, focusing on the bond they shared, a warmth cutting through the chill. Let go of my friend. Emma squeezed Sophie's hand, sharing their fear and courage in one act of defiance. The warmth in her grip pulsed like a beacon, cutting through the darkness. In that moment, Sophie blinked, her eyes clearing. I want to go home, she cried out, voice rising in strength. And as if in reaction, the air ruptured, the dark figure recoiling as a blinding light flickered around them. Emma felt the chains begin to break, their grip loosening, but she couldn't fall back now. The fight was on. Together, Emma shouted, lifting their joined hands before them. The room vibrated with energy as a force pushed back against the figure, light flooding the space, burning away shadows, reclaiming the ICU from its grasp. But the figure simply shrieked, a sound that pierced through the newly formed clarity. You'll regret this, Emma, I will return. Then, in a flash, it vanished, leaving an echoing silence behind. Emma breathed heavily, the weight of terror lifting just slightly. Sophia's grip was tight in hers, both trembling with shock. Was it gone? The girl asked, pale and wide-eyed. I think so, Emma replied, though doubt echoed in her heart. They weren't safe yet. The lights flickered again, casting uncertainty. But a new dread settled in as Emma realized. They weren't alone. A low, deliberate knocking came from the door, slow and ominous. A warning that something or someone had returned. Emma's blood ran cold, the sound of the knocking resonating deep within her bones. It was a steady rhythm, deliberate, as if someone or something was savoring every moment of their dread. She glanced at Sophie, whose eyes were wide, terror gripping her small frame. We need to go, Emma whispered, her voice trembling as she inched toward the door, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. The cold drafts curling through the room seemed to tug at her, pulling her away from the door, urging her to remain. The knocking intensified, a heavy thud that echoed with an unsettling familiarity. It was a sinister invitation, taunting them to come closer. Don't open it, please, Sophie pleaded, her grip tightening around Emma's hand. Just a minute, Emma muttered, forcing herself to breathe. She could sense a presence on the other side. It wasn't just fear. It was hunger, a yearning to consume whatever light dared to approach. The knocking stopped abruptly. Silence enveloped the room, thick and heavy, wrapping around them like a shroud. Emma held her breath, straining to listen, her heart pounding in her ears. She felt the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes watching them. Emma, Sophie whimpered, what if it's back? Can't be, not yet. But deep down, doubt began to gnaw at her resolve. Had they truly escaped? Had that thing really vanished, or was it biding its time? Then, without warning, the door creaked open. Not pushed, not swung, but simply opened as if compelled by an unseen force. Emma's heart raced. Shadows spilled into the room, stretching along the walls like dark fingers. Leave now while you can. A voice rasped from the hall. It was no one she recognized, the sound scraping along her ears and clawing at her mind. Who are you? Emma called out, her voice barely above a whisper, a thin veil of bravado over her trembling fear. A figure stepped into the light spilling from the overhead bulbs. Emma recoiled. The face was familiar yet utterly wrong, a nurse she knew from the past. But now it was a mask of horror, skin mottled and stretched as if someone had pulled it too tight. Hollow cheeks, lifeless eyes, and a grin that seemed to promise doom. Sophie, it's too late to run, the specter hissed, reaching out a skeletal finger. You've awakened something far worse than before. Emma's mind raced. Who was this? What had happened to her? Panic clamped down like a vice on her throat. No, you're not real, she shouted, even as her instincts told her otherwise. She stepped back towards Sophie, ready to shield her. Do you think this will end well? The figure asked, tilting its head with a sickening gleam in its eyes. What you disturbed won't allow you to leave so easily. Suddenly, the lights above flickered violently, shadows dancing frantically around them. Emma felt Sophie tugging increasingly at her sleeve, her breath coming fast, her eyes mirroring the rising panic. "Stay close," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We'll find a way out." But the figure was already laughing, a low, haunting sound that echoed off the walls, feeding on their terror. "It's hungry for your fears, Emma. It knows your regrets, and it will feast." With a sharp clang, the door slammed shut behind the apparition, sealing them in with the chaos. "No!" Emma screamed, pounding on the door, then looking back at Sophie. The girl's face was pale and terrified, staring wide-eyed at the leering specter before them. "What do we do?" Sophie asked breathlessly. Emma swallowed hard. "I don't know, but we can't give up." The shadows grew thicker, swirling towards them, an unhinged rush of darkness that pooled at their feet. Emma felt it closing in, the weight of despair crushing her resolve. The dark figure began to sway, inching towards them as its grin stretched impossibly wide. "Are you ready to join the others?" it crooned, voice dripping with malice. In that moment, dread clawed its way into Emma's heart. What horrors lay waiting beyond this night? But even more frightening was the whisper echoing through her thoughts. Had they truly not escaped at all? She didn't know if they could hold on much longer. As the darkness surged forward, she realized survival might come at an unimaginable price. The figure lunged, and everything disappeared into the abyss. Emma gasped, the air rushing back into her lungs as she found herself standing, disoriented, in the same room but now eerily silent. The specter had vanished, and the walls breathed a heavy sigh, almost as if they, too, were relieved momentarily from the terror. But the darkness still lingered around them, a thick fog of dread that pressed in on all sides. Sophie stood beside her, trembling. What just happened? Where did it go? Her voice was small, filled with an innocent disbelief that made Emma's heart ache. "Just stay close," Emma replied, though her own voice quivered and she felt the ground beneath her shift. The malicious laughter still echoed in her head, a dark symphony that refused to fade. Tentatively, Emma stepped forward, taking measured breaths. Each step felt like wading through molasses. They'd seen something horror-stricken, something not meant for the living, and the knowledge of that truth now clung to them. She could almost see the whispers of shadows skirting just beyond her vision, shivering along the edges of her sanity. Then, a low moan echoed through the air, pulling her back to reality. It was then she noticed the shadows hovering at the corners of the room, pulsating, shifting like dark smoke caught in a current. A sense of urgency bubbled beneath her skin, pushing her to act. "We have to find a way out," Emma said suddenly. "Come on." They moved cautiously towards the door that had sealed them in. But the door was no longer just a barrier. It had morphed into a foreboding threshold, a line between safety and the unknown. Emma placed her hand on the cold metal handle, the icy touch sending a shiver coursing through her. "Ready?" she asked, but Sophie remained quiet, her eyes darting around wildly as if she sensed something lurking just beyond their grasp. Without waiting for a response, Emma turned the handle and flung the door open. It creaked loudly, sounding almost like a warning, and darkness spilled back into the room with a thirst for escape. In the corridor, the overhead lights flickered and hummed, illuminating nothing but empty space. "Look," Sophie gasped, pointing ahead. Emma followed her gaze and froze. The dark figure reappeared at the far end of the hall, a ghastly silhouette with glowing eyes that pierced the gloom, reflecting nothing but cold malice. It was distorted, twitching unnaturally as if caught between dimensions. "It's coming," Emma shouted, pulling Sophie back inside the room and slamming the door shut. They stood there, back pressed against the door, hearts hammering against their ribs. "What do we do?" Sophie cried, barely holding back tears. Emma's mind raced. She had drowned in fear, but now they had to act. Find another way out. "There must be something," Emma said, scanning the shadows around them. The darkness felt alive. It crept and twisted, unnerving her. Then she noticed a faint glimmer in the corner of the room, something shiny partially obscured by dust. Over there, Emma pointed. They dashed toward it, fear igniting their speed. It was an old metal toolbox, rusted but intact. Emma fumbled to open it and pulled out various item screws, a wrench, and at the bottom, a flashlight. "This might help," she said, flicking the switch. The sudden beam sliced through the shadows, illuminating the figure's faint outline, making it flinch. As the light flickered, their surroundings changed. The walls shuddered. The air thickened. The specter's laughter returned, louder now, punctuating their futile effort. "You really think you can escape?" it taunted, melding with the sound of rustling shadows. Emma's resolve hardened. "We won't let you take us," she shouted defiantly, but uncertainty gnawed at her. "Hold on," she said, feeling Sophia's warm hand clutching hers tightly. They needed a plan, a way to leverage their fears against the darkness. Suddenly, the toolbox clanked as the figure lunged at the door, slamming against it, shaking their fragile sanctuary. The lights flickered again, casting grotesque shapes over the walls. Then Emma caught on a thought sparked at the edge of her mind. What if we confront it? What if we face our fears? But could they? Would having courage mean diving deeper into the abyss? The shadows swirled violently, forcing their breath to come in gasps. They had to decide quickly: would they stand and face the grotesque truth, or would escape lead them deeper into a nightmare? With the specter screaming in agony, Emma knew they had only moments left before the choice would be made for them. She turned to Sophie, whose eyes reflected a storm of dread and resolve. "Ready?" But as she opened her mouth to respond, the dark figure broke through, reaching for them both with arms that distorted reality. What waited on the other side of their decision twisted in the shadows, whispering promises of dread. Did bravery lead to salvation, or would it devour them whole? Emma's heart raced, thoughts tangled like the shadows surrounding them. What would she sacrifice for survival? And as the darkness enveloped them once more, she realized an unsettling truth. The answers lay within the terrors they dared to face. The air warped around them, thick with the oppressive chill that made Emma's skin crawl. She could feel the specter's presence coiling, wrapping around her mind like a serpent. With scarcely a thought, she gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam becoming a quivering line of defiance against the darkness. But did it really matter? The figure just stood there, motionless, its eyes boring into hers. They glowed like twin embers, flickering with malevolence. Emma's heart stumbled painfully in her chest. Her breathing quickened, echoing loudly in the silence that fell around them. She fought to push back the creeping panic. "Let us not just stand here," Sophie whispered, her face pale and stricken with fear. "We can't let it gnaw at our minds, right?" Emma exhaled shakily, taking a step back away from the door that had served as their barrier. "We need to find a way out now." Suddenly, the specter let out a shriek so piercing it sent a wave of ice through Emma's veins, silencing them both. It was a sound that resonated through the very core of their being. Every shadow quaked in response, and she felt the toolbox vibrate beneath her fingertips. Emma turned her back to the demon, forcing herself to breathe deeply, to think clearly. They needed a plan. The flashlight beam flickered threateningly, so she steadied her hand, aiming it toward the far wall, where the shadows seemed to pulse and twist as if beckoning. "Maybe we can corner it," she said with sudden clarity, ignoring the bite of fear clenching her stomach. "If we can force it to reveal something, maybe it can be defeated." Sophia's eyes widened as she glanced nervously at the door. "It won't let us go easily. It's trapped us here for a reason. We can't think like that." Emma tightened her grip again. "We have to confront it. If it knows what we're afraid of, then maybe we can change that. Let us make the darkness our ally." "Make it our ally?" Sophie gasped, disbelief wreathing her words. "Are you insane? Or maybe we're just tired of being its prey." Emma snapped back, newfound determination sparking within her. She took a step toward the flickering shadows, her heart pounding thunderously. The beam of the flashlight illuminated its twisted form, the grotesquely elongated limbs stretching toward them. "Face us," she called, the words tumbling out, fueled by adrenaline. "Show yourself." For a split second, the specter hesitated. Its glowing eyes flickered, and for the first time, Emma detected surprise mingling with malice. A moment of vulnerability. Emma seized the opportunity, pushing forward. "You think you can intimidate us with darkness? You don't know who you're dealing with." The shadows writhed angrily, the laughter returning and mingling with the sound of scraped metal, a cacophony of torment that rattled her bones. But she stood tall, defying the terror weaving its way through the air. "Shut up," Sophie screamed, her voice raw with emotion. "Show us what you want. Why are you doing this?" The figure recoiled slightly, as if it had been stung. The echoes of laughter subsided, replaced by a whispered hiss that didn't belong to the air, but to the gaping maw of fear itself. Suddenly, the light from the flashlight flickered wildly, dimming as the specter retreated. Time itself warped, dragging the atmosphere thick and heavy. Wisps of shadow gathered around Emma and Sophie, twisting into shapes that teased her vision, skimming the edge of horror. Sophie's voice trembled, cutting through the cloying mist. "I think it's scared." Emma's heart raced. They turned back toward the shadows. The realization started to settle in. They might not be as powerless as they thought. What if it needs something? What if it's... What? Sophie stopped, staring wide-eyed as the shadows formed into multiple shapes, faces contorted in anguish, hunger, desperation. The specter grumbled, growing more agitated, its surface rippling like disturbed water. "Those faces, they're lost," Emma said, a shiver creeping down her spine. "We have to free them from this evil, whatever it is." But could they do it without sacrificing themselves? With trepidation draping around them, they stood before the specter, nerves crackling, and everything hinged on that moment. "Let us help," Emma called out, breathless as she realized the enormity of their task. "What do you want?" What if freeing the lost souls meant a confrontation even deeper into the abyss? Would facing such a choice lead to their salvation? And just then, the darkness surged, swallowing them whole once more, whispering secrets they weren't prepared to learn. Emma felt the shadows constricting around her, like a giant serpent ready to squeeze the life out of its prey. The faces twisted against the darkness, their mouths opening soundlessly, pleading for something she couldn't understand. A horror unlike anything she had ever faced wrapped itself around her heart, squeezing tighter as she tried to cling to reason. "What do you think it wants from us?" Sophie's voice was a whisper, barely breaking through the suffocating silence. She fidgeted nervously, her eyes darting back to the flickering beam of light. With every pulse of the flashlight, the figures in the dark seemed to ripple. Emma caught her breath, bracing herself. "I don't know, but we have to show it we're not afraid. We can't become part of that sorrow." Sophie nodded, a reluctant courage washing over her, ignited by Emma's resolve. "Okay, let us try again." They took a collective breath, gathering their courage as a strange calm settled in attention before the storm. "We come in peace," Emma shouted, her voice echoing, bursting through the weighty silence. "We want to help." As their words hung in the air, the shadows began to shift. The faces twisted and writhed, but instead of attacking, they grew still, listening, waiting. "Please," Sophie cried, a tremor coursing through her. "Show us what we need to do." The specter's gaze turned toward them, its fiery eyes illuminating the space with an unnatural glow. Then, the darkness parted slowly, revealing something in the depths, a faint light beckoning from the far corners. "What's that?" Emma pointed, her heart racing as she squinted into the murky abyss. In the sudden stillness, the specter loomed larger, its form expanding and ebbing like the tide, taking on more monstrous shapes. Gnarled hands, sharp claws, and a maw whispering secrets. A monstrous gust of wind swept through the small room, extinguishing their flashlight, plunging them into complete darkness. "Emma, what do we do?" Sophie shrieked, panic creeping into her voice as the darkness swallowed them. "Trust me," Emma yelled back, her breath hitching in her throat. "Follow my voice." She reached out blindly, grasping in the dark for Sophie, her fingers feeling only cold air. Suddenly, the whisper returned, rising from the darkness like a tide, a sickly sweet promise that churned Emma's stomach. Free us, who are you?" Emma shouted, the vibrato in her voice betraying her fear, her mind racing against time and terror. "Memories trapped, we need you." The words merged into a chorus of moans, pulling at her heartstrings, demanding to be heard. "No." Emma's eyes widened in horror as she realized the implication. The shadows were crying out, but what if freeing them meant giving up part of themselves? She turned to Sophie, her heart pounding. "We need to know what we're giving up first, or else it'll consume us." Before she could utter another word, the air thickened, wrapping around them like chains. The specter roared, throwing them back, and the faces surged forward, desperate and disoriented. It was chaos, the kind that fractured reality itself with sheer will. Emma pushed her hands forward, instinctively shielding herself from the throng of lost souls. "Leave us. We don't belong here," she screamed, fear clawing at her throat. But the shadows only closed in tighter, wailing, harmonizing in anguish, battling against the trapped spirits that surrounded them. Time itself folded, stretching as the darkness enveloped them, and Emma felt the pulse of their desperate need thrumming through her bones. "What do you want from us?" she screamed, her voice barely a whisper now as dread consumed her. Then silence fell. The suffocating grip slackened momentarily. A brief, deceptive pause. A single face emerged from the throng, its features twisted in pain. "There is no escaping," it rasped, sending tremors of ice racing down Emma's spine. "You must choose before the night takes you." As the shadows surged once more, tightening their hold, Emma realized they stood at a precipice, staring into an abyss where light met darkness. Could they really confront the truth of that choice? Would they emerge unscathed, or would they become part of the shadows that haunted this place forever? And just when Emma thought she saw a glimmer of hope in the distance, the darkness erupted again, swallowing them whole. With a bone-chilling roar, the darkness wrapped around them again, squeezing tighter, amplifying every shred of fear in Emma's body. She felt the pulsating energy of the wailing faces pressing closer, their whispers a clamor that gnawed at her sanity. Each scream felt like a dagger in her mind. "Emma, I can't breathe." Sophie's voice cut through the chaos, thick with despair. Emma could hear the frantic breathing, the tremor of panic. She desperately searched for her friend, her fingers reaching out in the oppressive dark. "We have to stand together," Emma shouted, though uncertainty clawed at her heart. "Hold on to me. We can break free." But the air was thick with anguish, every breath steeped in disbelief. Suddenly, the clamoring voices congealed into a single, haunting narrative. "Release us, let us heal." Emma couldn't tell where the sound came from. It seemed to envelop her, surrounding her like a fog of sorrow. "What do you mean?" she cried into the suffocating void. "What do we have to do?" As if in response, a freezing wind swept past, forcing her to shiver violently. The ghostly faces flickered like dying fire, their features shifting, revealing a glimpse into their tortured souls. Each visage told a story of loss, regret, and despair. "Emma," Sophie gasped, her voice taut with fear. "What if we're their last hope?" "Hope?" Emma echoed bitterly. "What if they just want to take us with them?" Her mind screamed against the thought, but a glimmer of doubt flickered in her heart like a candle about to snuff out. The darkness inhaled sharply, and then the weight lifted just a fraction. A path appeared, a glimmer of light once more breaking through the eternal night. "Follow the light," the voices implored. They beckoned, and the spectral glow flickered like an anxious heartbeat. "What do we do?" Sophie's words faltered, laced with desperation. "Do we trust them? Can we risk it?" There was only one choice. Emma took hold of Sophie's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We have to try," she said with determination that masked the tremor in her heart. "If we don't, we may never get another chance." They stepped towards the light, feeling an invisible tug pulling them along the tear in reality. The shadows cracked around them, their palpable dread clashing with this new hope. With each step, Emma felt the simultaneous pull of the sorrowful souls urging them back and the light promising release as they moved forward. A figure lunged forward from the darkness, an anguished face, eyes wide with desperation. "Don't leave us," cried, fingers stretching out for them. Emma recoiled, her breath hitching in her throat. "Is this what they meant?" Sophie stammered, uncertainty etching her features. "Are we meant to carry them with us?" A horrible realization dawned as they neared the light. What if their escape required a sacrifice? What if they had to choose which souls to bring along and which to abandon? The thought twisted in Emma's gut like a phantom dagger, pain lacing every thought. "No, we can't choose," Emma shouted, panic threading her voice. In that moment, she felt a surge of cold clamor around her, faces emerging like shadows of broken memories. This isn't freedom. This is a trap. Yet, the light grew brighter, revealing more than just an exit. It revealed the truth of their captivity. For a brief moment, Emma saw herself reflected in the faces, each one a piece of her past intertwined with their struggle. Then, bone-rattling screams erupted from the anguished chorus, a suffocating whirlwind of despair. The ground they stood on trembled beneath their feet, the darkness undulating like a living entity. "Emma, we need to choose now," Sophie screamed, desperation etching every word as reality began to warp around them. In that terrifying instant, every emotion became raw, a visceral battle between hope and hopelessness. "Who do we save?" Emma shouted into the void just before the fabric of reality twisted and the light flickered dangerously. Would they break through this torment? Or would they be forever cursed to become shadows among shadows? As darkness threatened to engulf them once more, Emma felt the pull of the light reiterated, urging them forward, and yet just as fiercely. She could hear the lament of souls left behind. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together," she murmured to Sophie, steeling herself. The decision loomed closer, the abyss screaming out with grief and need. What horrors awaited them on the other side? And would they pay the ultimate price to escape? The light surged, a brilliant beacon amidst the encroaching shadows. Emma felt its warmth invade her skin, washing over her like a gentle tide. It beckoned, promising safety, an escape from the anguish that had held them captive. With trembling hands, she tugged Sophie towards the radiance, desperate to reach its refuge. But just as they moved forward, the ground beneath them groaned, like a wounded beast. The dark chorus grew louder, wails morphing into a haunting roar that set Emma's heart racing. "They don't want us to leave," Sophie gasped, panic fueling her words. "We have to hurry." Yet, the pull of the darkness tugged violently at their heels. Faces twisted in agony reached out, fingers clawing through the gloom. "Stay with us. You're our only chance," they screamed as if their very existence hinged on Emma and Sophia's choice. Their pain pierced through the light, creating a swirling vortex of uncertainty. "Who do we save?" Emma whispered, her voice cracking, the weight of the world pressing down like an anchor. She felt weightless, and yet heavy with dread. "I can't decide." The faces had a life of their own, flourishing in the despair that surrounded them. Each scream was a pulse, each whisper an echo of their haunting past, the accumulated sorrow feeding a darkness that threatened to swallow them whole. Desperation clawed at Emma's throat. "Don't listen to them. We have to keep moving." Just then, the spectral glow flickered. Emma's heart plummeted when she noticed the figure of a small child among the abyss. A fragile hand extended from the shadows, desperation reflected in innocent eyes. "Please, don't leave me." Emma's breath hitched. Memories surged, visions of playground laughter. Scraped knees and bedtime stories echoed in her mind. Her heart wrenched. How could they leave this child behind? "Emma!" Sophia's voice broke through the fog. "We can't get caught. It's a trap." Suddenly, the ground rippled violently. The zone of safety shrank, collapsing under the weight of relentless screeching pleas. Emma's resolve began to falter as the darkness closed in, tightening its grip. Their path backward became lined with anguished figures shrieking for release. "Make the choice," a voice cold as steel demanded, echoing deep within her. "Bring someone with you." The light flickered again, and Emma looked desperately at Sophie, whose eyes mirrored the same wavering uncertainty. What if we can save all of them? Emma protested weakly, her heart stalling against inevitable despair. We can't, Sophie urged, her voice a mix of fear and conviction. If we try, we may lose ourselves. But Emma felt like a dam ready to burst. What if we fail? What if we leave an innocent behind? As the shadows writhed with a fierce hunger closing in, the cries twisted into a cacophonous urgency. Each soulless fear clawed at Emma's sanity, tapping into a primal part of her. She could almost see the line of ethereal beings stretching deep into the infinite dark, each soul tethered to the next. Pick someone, the darkness sneered, vibrating with anticipation. What will it be? Their pain or your escape? Emma's heart raced, pulsing between guilt, panic, and the insatiable pull of survival. She hesitated, paralyzed by the lives hanging in the balance. We can't let this be how it ends. A flash of the light sparked, offering her an ephemeral glimpse of hope. But with it came a chilling realization. Each moment spent deliberating, a shadow moved closer, hungry for her very essence. We have to jump, Sophie suddenly shouted, fear igniting in her eyes as she grabbed Emma's arm. Time fractured around them as Emma glimpsed the sorrowful faces drowning in despair, all intertwined with her past, her own experiences surfacing through the weight of choice. Each face mirrored some part of her life. They weren't just figments. They were real. No, Emma screamed as they turned back towards the blinding light. We can't leave them. As Sophie yanked her towards freedom, Emma felt the last thread snapping, the weight of the souls anchoring her to the darkness. The wailing crescendo surged, painfully in her mind, and the choice loomed ever larger, like a shadow threatening to devour her spirit. Would she choose the light and risk leaving behind a part of herself? Or would they plunge into the darkness, forever bound to the anguished cries? Emma! Sophie's voice trembled as they faced the light, an uncertain path still stretching ahead. With a final, defiant look at the anguished faces, Emma asked the void, what happens if we don't choose anyone? At that moment, the darkness roared one last time, sending a shockwave through Emma's body, and the world felt like it was tearing apart, blurring the lines of salvation and damnation. Each second felt like an eternity, and as they leaped towards the unknown, Emma whispered to the shadows one last time, I'm sorry what fate awaited them on the other side. Should they escape? And would their escape mark the beginning of a new horror? Emma and Sophie soared through the darkness, feeling weightless yet tethered to the anguished cries that echoed around them. Time twisted and bent, reality unraveling as they were drawn toward the blinding light. As they broke through, the shadows clawed at them, frantically whispering, don't leave us. But their voices were fading, pulling away like a receding tide. The sensation was instantaneous. The chill that had clung to them slipped away, replaced by warmth. Emma tumbled to the ground, gasping for breath as color flooded her surroundings. They were back in the cardiac ICU, the sterile smell of antiseptic filling her lungs, familiar and foreign all at once. Sophie sprung up beside her, wide-eyed as she surveyed the room. Did we make it? She whispered, a hint of disbelief coloring her voice. Emma turned to the girl, relief flooding her chest as she nodded, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. I think we did. We really did. But as Emma took a deep breath, a familiar tension crept back into the air. The lights flickered above them once more, and a faint tapping sound echoed from the far end of the room, the same rhythmic knocking that had heralded their final encounter with the specter. Emma? Sophie's voice quivered, and anxiety had a vice-like grip around their hearts once again. What if it's still there? Emma stood tall, crossing her arms over her chest. We faced it once, and we can do it again, she said, trying to wrap her own fear in a shroud of courage. We need to stay strong. Whatever happens, we stick together. They walked cautiously toward the sound, light gleaming against the sterile walls, footsteps echoing in the quietude. The ICU felt alive, every breath of air charged with unspoken potential. But there was an ominous sensation, a reminder of what they had just endured lurking in the corners, waiting to strike. Suddenly, the white figure emerged from the shadows, gliding toward them like a dark whisper. Panic surged, but Emma held her ground, squeezing Sophia's hand tightly. The coolness emanating from it was a memory of dread. Yet in its presence, Emma felt surges of strength coursing through her. "Emma," it intoned quietly, voice reminiscent of the shadowy laughter they had heard before. "You think you have won? You have only delayed the inevitable." Its hollow eyes pierced through her, demanding her fear with a hunger that made her stomach twist with dread. She could feel her heart thudding in her chest, but it felt different now. Each pulse sang with defiance. "Leave us alone," Emma shouted, voice steady, power flaring inside of her. "We refuse to be your prey anymore." The specter paused, the air around it quivering in response. The lights above flickered once more, but instead of retreating in fear, Emma summoned the warmth she had felt just moments before. "You have no hold over us," she declared, matching its gaze head-on. The strength of her resolve lit up the room, illuminating the dark corners where despair once thrived. "What are you?" the specter hissed, voice fraying around the edges. Its form seemed to waver, shifting between realities, revealing glimpses of terrified faces desperately reaching for escape remnants of those it had consumed. Emma felt sorrow tugging at her heart, a reminder of those who might never find peace. "You're trapped in your own hate," she said gently. "You don't have to haunt the living. You can let them go." The figure swayed, and for a fleeting moment, Emma thought she saw a flicker of remorse in its hollow depths. "You have no idea of what it's like to be forgotten," it snarled, anguish distorting its voice. "The pain binds us all. No, we can choose to rise above it," Emma urged, catching Sophia's eye. "Together we can change this." There was a sudden shift. The shadows that had once held them captive began to recoil as if Emma's words held a strange magic, allowing light to seep through the cracks of despair. "Release them. Let them go," she yelled, calling upon the strength of every brave soul who had faced darkness as if fueled by her determination. The emptiness around the specter began to tremble, memories spilling out like a torrential tide. Faces brightened and fell through tears of regret, swirling around Emma and Sophie. "No!" the figure screamed, its essence writhed, desperate to cling to its power. But Emma and Sophie stood firm, holding on to each other tightly, a force greater than any malevolence that haunted the ICU. "We choose light. We choose to remember, to heal." And with one final surge, the darkness fractured, shattering like glass, revealing the soft glow of dawn filtering through the windows. The specter, wailing in agony, crumbled away, releasing the spirits it had ensnared. That cry of sorrow transformed into a serene silence, echoing warmth and liberation. Emma felt the strength of countless spirits rise around her. She and Sophie were swept up in a wave of radiant light that pulsed with hope, igniting the ICU with warmth and life. No longer shackled by the past, each lost soul found peace, drifting off into the light as the room filled with morning sunlight. Emma and Sophie exchanged tearful smiles. Hearts lightened as they realized they had not only freed those trapped within the ICU but had broken the chains binding themselves. Together, Emma whispered, as the last remnants of darkness faded into the first light of day, they had reclaimed their power and found safety in unity. With deep breaths, they stepped out of the ICU doorway and into the world beyond, forever changed by their experience, a bond etched in courage, a lesson learned. Whatever awaited beyond those walls was uncertain, but together, they could face anything. The whispers of shadows were gone, and a new day beckoned. Life awaited them, and hope shimmered in the distance. As we close this incredible journey, don't forget that you are an essential part of our community. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and spread the love. Flood the comments section with your reactions, favorite theories, and what you thought about the ending. And most importantly, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to experience this wild conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.